Here are my FPL transfer tips for Game Week 5. We're going to talk about the players you should be bringing in this week and how we got on in Game Week 4. Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to start with Aina from Nottingham Forest following their clean sheet at Anfield last week. Nottingham Forest are currently third best for expected goals conceded in the league, and they're top for expected goals conceded away from home in the league. They also play quite a defensive style of football, which is probably what you want from your value defenders. Now, Nottingham Forest actually performed quite well for expected goals conceded last season, but they did concede a lot from set pieces. I think of all the teams in that sort of 4.5 mil defender bracket, they're probably the team you should be targeting. They've got some pretty good upcoming fixtures, but just a note on Brighton away this week, that's not the easiest fixture for them, although Brighton did struggle against that low block at Ipswich and they could have even lost that game. As Aina is a 4.5 mil defender, you're probably going to be rotating him with your more premium defenders when he has better fixtures than them. He's also got quite low ownership, so he could be a great differential for the next 4 or 5 game weeks. Okay, so we're going to move on to a player that frustrates a lot of FPL managers, and that's Nicholas Jackson from Chelsea. Now, I do understand the frustration with Jackson because he does miss a lot of chances, but that said, he does have 4.8 per match this season, which isn't too bad for a 7.6 million forward. He's got West Ham away this week. Now, West Ham, similar to last season, they have the third worst expected goals conceded in the league this season. Now, Jackson has 0.69 expected goals per 90, so I think he'll get chances this week. He's also a bit more assured for minutes than the other Chelsea attackers because there's a bit less competition for him. He's also had 9 shots all in the box this season, and in fact, if you actually have a look at his shot zones, they're all quite central and in and around that 6-yard area. The fixtures do get a little bit tougher in the coming game weeks, and if you're on wildcard in game week 6, I probably wouldn't have him in your teams, but I do think he's a good punt this week. So finally, I'm going to talk about 2 players that a lot of people are looking at this week, Vardy and Calvert-Lewin. Now, the reason that a lot of people are looking at these players is because they've both got 2 goals in their opening 4, and they've also got pretty decent upcoming fixtures. Now, just to start with these 2, I'm going to say that these are not players that you're probably going to want long term, despite the fixtures that they have. That's because Leicester and Everton are both in the bottom 3 for expected goals this season. Now, realistically, they're both going to be in a bit of a relegation scrap this season, though I do think Everton will be safe. One question mark that applies to both of these players is, will they be able to stay fit for the next 5 or 6 game weeks? Calvert-Lewin doesn't have a great injury record, and Jamie Vardy is 37, so you'd expect at some point this season they'll have a run of games where they miss out. If I had to choose between the 2, I'd go for Calvert-Lewin for a couple of reasons. The first reason being that although Jamie Vardy scored 2 goals this season, he's actually only had 3 shots in the opening 4 games. Now, you could look at it 2 ways. You could say that's a great conversion rate, but you could also say, well, Leicester haven't created many chances for him. Calvert-Lewin's had a few more chances and he's probably unlucky not to actually score more goals in the opening 4. Couple that with the fact that Everton have slightly better fixtures in the next 6, Calvert-Lewin looks like a good move for me, and in fact it's a transfer that I'm looking at myself this week. Okay, so now looking back at the dreaded Game Week 4. Now, this was my first red arrow of the season. I finished with 53 points. Prior to that Arsenal-Tottenham game, I actually only had Haaland that had returned. If I'm talking about highly owned players that done well this week, I can maybe point out 5 players. You've got Smith Rowe, Saka, Arsenal defence, Haaland, Watkins. But aside from that, the players that actually did well had quite low ownership. So if you had all the differentials this week, you probably had an amazing game week and you've climbed a million places in the overall ranks. I actually only fell 100,000 places, which I didn't think was too bad, considering that I only have 3 players that returned. A couple of highlights, Gabriel got the header against Tottenham. Now, I went for Saliba in my Game Week 1 draft. I'm starting to regret that decision a little bit because it looks like Timber's playing left back, Calafiori's playing left back. So while at the start of the season it looked like he had more competition for his place, it doesn't actually look like that's turned to be the case. He does also have more goal threat than Saliba. Now, obviously 2 goalkeepers that done well this week was Sanchez and Onana. Now, this is just an example of how points can swing in an instant, because if both of those penalties go in, they both lose their clean sheet and they don't get the penalty save points and they don't get the bonus points as well. Now, a couple of other notes that happened this week. Salah blanked for his first week of the season. Now, I know it's only 1 game week and I had Salah from game week 1, but I said his returns will slow down and he won't keep pace with Haaland. And I fully stand by that. That said, I do think Salah will have a good game week this week because Bournemouth press high and there's going to be a lot of transition and space in behind for him. But when Salah comes up against a low block, it's hard for him to get returns because there's not much transition. It's hard to break teams down. Liverpool really didn't look great against Nottingham Forest, and I think that might continue when they play defensive oppositions throughout the season. Now, I've got double Arsenal defence in my team. They look absolutely essential for the rest of the season. Obviously, they're playing Man City this week, so you probably don't want them this week, but from game week 6, if you're on wildcard, I would definitely have Arsenal defence. Of Arsenal, Man City and Liverpool, I think they'll definitely keep the most clean sheets. I actually think they play the most defensive football out of the three. They look quite happy to win a game 1 or 2-0. As long as you get the 3 points, I suppose it doesn't really matter. It might hurt Arsenal's attacking returns long term though, so if you're going to go for triple Arsenal, I'd probably go double defence and then 1 attacker. Now, Ollie Watkins got a brace last week, which is quite good when a player that you recommend gets 2 goals. If you're wildcarding in game week 6, I'd probably find a way to try and bring him in. Now, Mateta, who was my hero for game week 34 last season where he got a 27 pointer, he got a brace, but interestingly, he also took a penalty. Now, he's another player that's just in a long list of good options this season, but he's definitely one I'm putting on my radar and I might look to bring him in later in the season. Now, Wissa was a player that I actually talked about a couple of weeks ago. He's just suffered an ankle injury after he had a pretty good start to the season. It looks like he could be out for quite a long time, so if you've got him in your teams, I'd probably look at selling him this week. Forest, who I've already talked about, they look like the best value defence for the rest of the season. I would definitely look at bringing them in if you're on wildcard. So that's all from me. Make sure to like and subscribe if you found this video useful, and if you're bringing any players in this week, make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know. Let's hope we can put game week 4 behind us and get a green arrow for game week 5.